Welcome to the True Crimes Unfold compilation video series. Please note that events and scenarios in this video may be graphic for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what type of cases you'd like us to cover next, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. Don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released. Upon. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. Wang Nuanwan's life was a testament to ambition, resilience, and the power of self-determination. Born in a modest village in China, she grew up in a household where hard work was a necessity, not a choice. Her family's financial struggles inspired her to dream of a better future, and she resolved to create a life of stability and independence. From a young age, Wang Nuanwan displayed an entrepreneurial spirit. She excelled academically, earning scholarships that allowed her to attend university, where she majored in business administration. Her tenacity and sharp mind set her apart, and after graduation, she quickly climbed the ranks in the corporate world. By her late 20s, she had achieved what many could only dream of: financial success, independence, and a thriving career in real estate. Wang's ability to identify market trends and negotiate lucrative deals made her a rising star in her field. She eventually ventured into entrepreneurship, founding her own real estate development company. Her business acumen and reputation for fairness earned her the respect of her peers and clients alike. Within a decade, she had built a multi-million-dollar empire, transforming her life and the lives of her family. Despite her success, Wang remained humble and grounded. She was known for her generosity, often supporting local charities and mentoring young women aspiring to enter the business world. Her colleagues admired her sharp wit and kind heart, and her family cherished her unwavering support. For Wang, life was about more than wealth. It was about making a difference. Amid her bustling career, Wang longed for companionship. Her focus on building her business had left little time for personal relationships, but she still dreamed of finding someone who would share her values and celebrate her achievements. That dream seemed to come true when she met Liu Qiang, a charming man with a magnetic personality. Liu presented himself as the perfect partner. He was attentive, supportive, and appeared genuinely interested in Wang's life and work. He claimed to be a successful investor, often regaling her with stories of his financial ventures and future plans. For Wang, who had spent much of her life navigating the challenges of the business world alone, Liu's presence felt like a breath of fresh air. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Liu's romantic gestures and unwavering encouragement seemed to embody everything Wang had hoped for in a partner. He frequently praised her accomplishments and expressed admiration for her resilience and intelligence. Friends and family, who were initially wary of Liu's rapid integration into Wang's life, were soon charmed by his seemingly genuine affection for her. Within a year, the couple married in a lavish ceremony that symbolized their shared prosperity and future. For Wang, it was a moment of fulfillment, a celebration of love and partnership that complemented the professional success she had worked so hard to achieve. However, behind Liu's charming exterior lay a web of deceit that would ultimately unravel in the most tragic way. As the couple settled into married life, subtle cracks began to appear in Liu's facade. While he continued to maintain the image of a devoted husband, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. Wang began to notice discrepancies in Liu's stories about his business dealings and his frequent absences from home. When she gently questioned him, he would dismiss her concerns with elaborate excuses or deflect by lavishing her with gifts and compliments. Despite her growing unease, Wang chose to trust her husband, attributing his behavior to the pressures of his work. She believed in the partnership they had built and was determined to support him through whatever challenges he faced. This trust, deeply rooted in her values and belief in people's capacity for change, would later become her greatest vulnerability. Liu's true intentions became increasingly clear when he began pressuring Wang to alter her financial arrangements. He encouraged her to name him as a co-owner of her properties and suggested consolidating their assets under his management. Wang, who had always been meticulous about her finances, hesitated but ultimately agreed, wanting to demonstrate her trust and commitment to their marriage. Unbeknownst to Wang, Liu's charm and ambition masked a dangerous greed. His interest in her wealth far outweighed his affection for her, and he had been carefully orchestrating a plan to take control of her fortune. While Wang focused on growing her business and supporting their life together, Liu was plotting a betrayal that would shake her world to its core. Wang's life, built on trust and hard work, was about to collide with Liu's web of manipulation and greed. The man she had welcomed into her heart and life was not the partner she thought he was, and the events that would soon unfold would test her resilience and courage in unimaginable ways. For Wang Nuanwan, life with Liu Xiang seemed to be everything she had hoped for in a partnership, at least on the surface. Yet, beneath the veneer of their seemingly happy marriage, Liu's true intentions were beginning to take shape. What Wang believed to be love and shared ambition was, in reality, a calculated plot to exploit her trust and steal her hard-earned fortune. As their marriage progressed, Liu began to exhibit more troubling behavior. He frequently complained about financial difficulties in his business ventures, asking Wang for loans to bridge temporary gaps. Though Wang was meticulous with her money, she was also generous and eager to support her husband. Over the next several months, she lent Liu significant sums, trusting his assurances that he would repay her once his investments paid off. However, Liu's debts only seemed to grow, and his excuses became more convoluted. Wang noticed inconsistencies in his stories and began questioning his financial acumen. Each time she confronted him, Liu would deftly redirect the conversation, blaming external factors or accusing her of not trusting him enough. To placate her concerns, he showered her with lavish gifts, all purchased using her money. Despite her growing unease, Wang's belief in the sanctity of their marriage prevented her from fully confronting the depth of Liu's deceit. She rationalized his behavior as the result of stress and felt compelled to stand by him. It was a decision rooted in her loyalty and faith in their partnership, a faith Liu would betray in the most horrific way. In early 2020, Liu suggested a romantic getaway to a scenic mountain range known for its breathtaking cliffs and serene hiking trails. He framed the trip as an opportunity for them to reconnect and take a break from the stresses of work and life. Wang, always appreciative of nature and eager to spend quality time with her husband, agreed enthusiastically. The couple set out for the mountains, with Liu meticulously planning their itinerary. He seemed unusually attentive, ensuring they visited the most picturesque locations and documenting their journey with photographs. Wang, though still harboring doubts about their recent financial strains, felt a renewed sense of connection during the trip. It was a brief reprieve from her growing suspicions, a moment of hope that their relationship could recover. On the final day of their trip, Liu suggested they visit a remote cliffside known for its stunning sunset views. Wang, trusting her husband's intentions, followed him along the winding path to the edge of the cliff. As they stood there, surrounded by nature's beauty, Liu's demeanor changed. He grew quiet, his usual charm replaced by an unsettling intensity. Before Wang could process the shift, Liu grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her over the edge. Wang plummeted over 30 meters, her body crashing into jagged rocks below. The impact left her severely injured, with her multiple fractures and internal bleeding. Miraculously, she survived the fall, her resilience and sheer will to live pushing her to cling to consciousness. Alone and unable to move, she lay at the base of the cliff, unsure if help would ever come. Meanwhile, Liu returned to the trailhead, feigning panic as he reported that Wang had accidentally fallen while taking a photograph. He painted himself as a devastated husband, inconsolable and desperate for help. Rescuers were dispatched immediately, and within hours, they reached Wang, who was barely clinging to life. Against all odds, Wang was airlifted to a nearby hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery. Doctors marveled at her strength and determination to survive, but her injuries were extensive, requiring weeks of recovery. During her time in the hospital, Wang began piecing together the events of that day. The realization that Liu had deliberately tried to kill her was both devastating and infuriating. As she regained her strength, Wang shared her suspicions with the authorities. Her recollection of Liu's behavior during the trip, combined with forensic evidence from the scene, painted a damning picture. Investigators noted that the area where Wang fell was not a typical spot for photographs. It was secluded and dangerous, suggesting premeditation on Liu's part. The investigation into Liu's motives uncovered a chilling pattern of deceit and greed. Bank records revealed that he had been systematically draining Wang's accounts for months, funneling money into his failing ventures and personal luxuries. Further digging uncovered life insurance policies Liu had taken out in Wang's name, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. The policies, worth millions, were signed just weeks before the trip, raising a red flag for investigators. Liu's financial troubles were far worse than Wang had known. He was drowning in debt from failed business deals and owed money to multiple creditors. The trip to the mountains, investigators concluded, was not a romantic getaway, but a meticulously planned attempt to murder Wang and claim the insurance payout to cover his debts. Witness testimonies from Wang's friends and family further highlighted Liu's manipulative behavior. Several recounted instances where Wang had confided her doubts about his honesty, only to dismiss them out of a desire to keep her marriage intact. Forensic evidence from the scene, including scuff marks near the cliff edge and inconsistencies in Liu's account provided additional proof of his intent. As the evidence mounted, authorities arrested Liu on charges of attempted murder and fraud. He initially maintained his innocence, insisting that Wang's fall was a tragic accident. However, under the weight of overwhelming evidence, his facade began to crumble. Wang, despite her physical and emotional trauma, resolved to see justice served. Her testimony, combined with the investigative findings, set the stage for a trial that would expose Liu's greed and betrayal to the world. Wang Nuanwan's survival was nothing short of miraculous, but the road to recovery was long and arduous. Her physical injuries were severe, but the emotional scars of her husband's betrayal cut even deeper. Yet, even in her darkest moments, Wang refused to be defined by the actions of a man who had tried to destroy her. As she prepared to face Liu in court, Wang vowed not only to seek justice for herself, but also to use her story to warn others about the dangers of blind trust and manipulation. Her resilience became a source of inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable betrayal, strength and determination could prevail. The arrest of Liu Qiang marked the beginning of a thorough investigation that would unravel his calculated plan to betray and murder his wife, Wang Nuanan. As authorities delved deeper into Liu's actions, they uncovered a chilling web of greed, deceit, and premeditation. Ensuring that justice for Wang would not only expose the truth, but also serve as a warning against such heinous crimes. From the outset, Liu presented himself as a distraught husband, claiming that Wang's fall was a tragic accident. He recounted how she had slipped while taking photographs at the edge of the cliff, describing the incident in vivid detail to rescue workers and police. However, inconsistencies in his story quickly raised red flags. Investigators returned to the scene and found scuff marks and disturbed soil near the edge of the cliff, evidence that suggested a struggle. The placement of these marks indicated that Wang had not merely slipped, but had been forcibly pushed. Witnesses who had seen Liu and Wang earlier in the day noted that Liu seemed unusually preoccupied, as though distracted by something weighing heavily on his mind. Forensic experts confirmed that the trajectory of Wang's fall and the nature of her injuries were inconsistent with an accidental slip. Meanwhile, Wang, still recovering in the hospital, provided her own account of the incident. Though her memory of the exact moment she was pushed was hazy, she recalled Liu's strange behavior leading up to the fall, including his insistence on visiting the secluded cliffside. She also shared her growing suspicions about Liu's financial motives, which investigators quickly corroborated. Digging into Liu's financial records, authorities uncovered clear evidence of his motive. Bank statements revealed that Liu had been embezzling money from Wang's accounts for months, transferring large sums into his own failing ventures. Additionally, he had maxed out credit cards under Wang's name and borrowed money against her assets without her knowledge. The most damning evidence came in the form of life insurance policies Liu had taken out on Wang shortly before the trip. The policies, worth millions, named Liu as the sole beneficiary. Investigators noted the timing of these policies and their suspiciously high value, concluding that Liu had planned to murder Wang to secure the payout and cover his mounting debts. Friends and family also testified about Liu's behavior In the months leading up to the trip, several of Wang's close friends recalled conversations in which she expressed doubts about Liu's honesty and his increasingly erratic behavior. These accounts painted a portrait of a man who had spent months meticulously grooming Wang's trust, while secretly orchestrating her downfall. As the evidence against Liu mounted, prosecutors worked to build a watertight case. They pieced together forensic findings, financial records, and witness testimonies to create a timeline of events that highlighted Liu's premeditation and greed. Surveillance footage from the hotel and hiking trail further confirmed Liu's actions, showing his calm demeanor immediately after Wang's fall, a stark contrast to his claims of shock and panic. Liu's defense team attempted to argue that the incident was an accident, citing his cooperation with rescue efforts and his lack of prior violent behavior. However, this narrative crumbled under the weight of forensic evidence and Liu's financial history. The prosecution emphasized the premeditated nature of Liu's actions, framing him as a cold and calculating individual who had manipulated Wang's trust for personal gain. When Liu's trial commenced in early 2021, it drew national attention. The courtroom was packed with reporters, supporters of Wang, and members of the public outraged by the betrayal she had endured. For Wang, who attended the trial in a wheelchair, the experience was both empowering and painful. A chance to confront the man who had tried to destroy her. The prosecution presented a compelling case, starting with Wang's testimony. Her account of Liu's behavior leading up to the incident, coupled with her emotional recounting of the fall and its aftermath, left a powerful impression on the jury. Wang's courage and determination to speak out, despite her injuries, underscored the severity of Liu's betrayal. Forensic experts testified about the evidence at the scene, confirming that Wang's fall was not accidental. They explained how the trajectory of her injuries aligned with a deliberate push rather than a slip, dismantling Liu's claims of innocence. Financial analysts detailed Liu's embezzlement and the life insurance policies, further highlighting his motive. The most damning evidence came from Liu's digital records. Investigators had recovered text messages and internet searches from Liu's phone that revealed his planning. Searches like how to make murder look like an accident and best places to push someone off a cliff left no doubt about his intent. These findings, combined with the life insurance policies, painted a chilling picture of premeditated murder. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before reaching a unanimous verdict: guilty of attempted murder and fraud. The judge, in delivering Liu's sentence, condemned his actions as an egregious betrayal of trust and humanity. Liu was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. For Wang, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but also deep sadness. "I trusted him with my life," she said in a public statement after the trial. "He took that trust and turned it into a weapon against me. But I am still here, and I will not let his actions define my story." The case sparked widespread outrage and discussions about financial exploitation and domestic abuse. Advocacy groups used Wang's story to highlight the dangers of blind trust and the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. Wang herself became a symbol of resilience, her survival and testimony inspiring others to speak out against abuse and manipulation. The trial also prompted calls for stricter oversight of financial and legal arrangements within marriages, as well as greater awareness of the warning signs of toxic relationships. For many, Wang's story was a wake-up call, a reminder that even the most successful and independent individuals can fall victim to betrayal. As Wang began the long process of rebuilding her life, she resolved to use her experience to help others. Her fight for justice had exposed Liu's greed and cruelty, but it also showcased her own strength and determination. In the face of unimaginable betrayal, Wang Nuanwan proved that resilience and courage could prevail, offering hope to countless others facing their own battles. Wang Nuanwan's survival and Liu Qiang's conviction marked the end of one harrowing chapter in her life, but the beginning of another. Her journey toward recovery and rebuilding her life after unimaginable betrayal. Though her physical injuries were severe, the emotional scars ran deeper, leaving Wang to navigate the aftermath of her husband's attempt to murder her. The fall had left Wang with multiple fractures, internal injuries, and long-term nerve damage. Her recovery was slow and grueling, requiring months of physical therapy and medical treatment. She faced daily challenges, from learning to walk again to regaining basic mobility. Each step was a testament to her resilience and determination to reclaim her independence. Wang's medical team was amazed by her perseverance. Despite the pain and setbacks, she approached her recovery with the same tenacity that had driven her success in business. "She's one of the strongest people we've ever treated," her lead physical therapist remarked. She refused to let this define her. Her family and friends became her unwavering support system during this time. They rallied around her, ensuring she had everything she needed, from emotional encouragement to practical assistance. Her parents, who had always been proud of her accomplishments, stood by her side every step of the way, reminding her of the strength she had shown throughout her life. While Wang's physical recovery was challenging, the emotional trauma of Liu's betrayal was even more difficult to process. The man she had loved and trusted had not only stolen from her, but had tried to end her life for financial gain. Coming to terms with this betrayal required immense courage and introspection. Wang sought therapy to address the psychological impact of the ordeal. Through counseling, she worked to understand her feelings of anger, grief, and betrayal. "It's not just about healing your body," she later said in an interview. "It's about healing your mind and your heart. That takes time, and it takes help." One of the hardest parts of her recovery was reconciling her own instincts and decisions. She struggled with guilt over having trusted Liu and questioned whether she had ignored warning signs. However, her therapist and loved ones reminded her that the fault lay solely with Liu. "He manipulated and deceived you," her best friend told her. "You were acting out of love and trust. That's not something to regret." As Wang's strength returned, she began focusing on reclaiming her identity and rebuilding the life Liu had tried to take from her. She reconnected with her business, which had suffered during her recovery, but remained operational thanks to her trusted team. Returning to work gave Wang a renewed sense of purpose and control, reminding her of the success she had built through her own determination. Wang also became an advocate for others who had experienced similar betrayals. She began sharing her story publicly, using her platform to raise awareness about financial exploitation and domestic abuse. Her speeches, interviews, and articles highlighted the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships and the need for systemic changes to protect vulnerable individuals. Her advocacy resonated with many, particularly women in similar circumstances. Wang's courage and honesty inspired others to speak out about their own experiences, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her immediate circle. If my story can help even one person avoid what I went through, she said, then it's worth telling. Wang's ordeal and recovery became a symbol of resilience and strength. Her refusal to let Liu's actions define her life inspired countless others facing their own struggles. She used her platform to call for greater protections against financial and emotional abuse, advocating for stricter regulations on life insurance policies and financial arrangements within marriages. In addition to her advocacy work, Wang launched a foundation dedicated to supporting survivors of abuse and exploitation. The Nuanuan Resilience Foundation provided resources, counseling, and financial assistance to individuals rebuilding their lives after traumatic experiences. For Wang, the foundation was a way to turn her pain into purpose, ensuring that others had the support they needed to heal and thrive. Though Wang's life would never be the same, she refused to let Liu's betrayal overshadow her achievements or her future. She found solace in the support of her family, friends, and community, drawing strength from the love and encouragement that surrounded her. She also began exploring new interests, such as traveling and writing, as part of her journey toward rediscovery. In her public appearances, Wang often emphasized the importance of hope and resilience. "Life can change in an instant," she said during a televised interview. "But even in the darkest moments, there's strength within you to rise again. No one can take that away from you." For Wang Nuanwan, survival was not just about overcoming the physical and emotional toll of her husband's actions. It was about reclaiming her story and proving that even in the face of unimaginable betrayal, the human spirit can endure and triumph. Her journey served as a beacon of hope for others, a reminder that resilience and courage could light the way forward no matter how dark the path may seem. Wang Wanwan's story is one of survival, resilience, and justice. Her ability to rise above betrayal and physical trauma inspired not only those who knew her, but countless others who heard her story. Yet, her harrowing experience also highlighted broader societal issues, gaps in protections against financial and emotional exploitation, and the dangers of unchecked greed within intimate. At its core, Wang's story is a cautionary tale about trust and deception in relationships. Her marriage to Liu Qiang, which began as a partnership filled with promise, was ultimately weaponized against her by a man driven by greed. For many, her experience underscored the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. Unexplained financial behavior, manipulation, and emotional distancing. Wang often spoke about the lessons she learned, not to warn people against trust, but to encourage them to balance it with vigilance. "Trust is a beautiful thing," she said in an interview, "but it must be earned and maintained through honesty and transparency. Never let someone's love blind you to your own instincts." Her advocacy also extended to empowering individuals, particularly women, to maintain financial independence and safeguard their assets. Wang emphasized the importance of open communication about finances within relationships and the need to ensure that legal and financial arrangements are clear and equitable. Wang's story prompted widespread discussions about the systemic failures that allowed Liu to exploit her so thoroughly. Advocacy groups pointed to the lack of oversight in financial arrangements within marriages, as well as insufficient protections for individuals vulnerable to manipulation and abuse. In response to public outcry, lawmakers began exploring reforms aimed at preventing similar cases. Proposed measures included stricter regulations on life insurance policies, requiring deeper scrutiny of beneficiary arrangements, and mandatory reporting of suspicious transactions involving joint accounts or marital assets. Legal experts also advocated for improved access to counseling and support services for individuals in financially or emotionally exploitative relationships. Wang lent her voice to these efforts, working alongside policymakers and advocacy groups to push for meaningful change. "What happened to me should never happen to anyone else," she said during a public address. "We need systems in place to protect people from those who would use love and trust as weapons." In the wake of her recovery, Wang founded the Nuan Resilience Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting survivors of financial and emotional abuse. The foundation offered counseling, legal aid, and financial assistance to individuals rebuilding their lives after betrayal or exploitation. It also conducted workshops on financial literacy and self-empowerment, equipping people with tools to protect themselves and their assets. The foundation quickly gained traction, with thousands of survivors reaching out for help and support. Wang's story became a source of hope for many, and her hands-on involvement in the foundation further cemented her commitment to helping others. Through this work, Wang transformed her personal tragedy into a platform for change, ensuring that her pain was not endured in vain. Wang's courage and determination resonated with people around the world. Her public appearances, interviews, and speeches became rallying cries for resilience and accountability. Survivors of similar betrayals saw in her a symbol of strength and a reminder that recovery was possible, no matter how deep the wounds. Social media campaigns, inspired by Wang's advocacy, used hashtags like Resilience for Nuan and Justice for Survivors to share her message and amplify her work. These campaigns created a global community of support, uniting people in their efforts to fight exploitation and empower those affected. Wang's legacy extends far beyond her personal triumphs. Her journey highlighted the strength of the human spirit and the power of community in overcoming adversity. Through her foundation, her advocacy, and her example, she became a beacon of hope for those navigating their own battles against betrayal and abuse. Reflecting on her journey, Wang once said, "The worst moments of my life became the reason I found my purpose. If I can help even one person avoid what I went through, then everything I've endured will have meaning." Wang Nuan's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of vigilance and empowerment, and the enduring power of justice. Her life, though marked by betrayal, became a symbol of hope and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can prevail. Her legacy lives on through her work and the countless lives she touched, proving that strength and compassion can triumph over even the greatest adversities. Michelle Lang, or Meng Mai Lang, as her family affectionately called her, was a bright and ambitious young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Born in Taiwan and raised in Australia, Michelle balanced the traditions of her heritage with the opportunities of her adopted homeland. Her parents, hard-working immigrants, instilled in her a strong sense of perseverance, respect, and kindness. These qualities would become defining traits of Michelle's personality and the foundation of her dreams. Growing up in Sydney, Michelle excelled both academically and socially. She had a natural curiosity and a love for learning that endeared her to her teachers and peers. By the time she entered her late teens, Michelle had begun charting a path toward her future. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, a career inspired by her own experiences with mentors who had shaped her life. She wanted to give back, her mother later said, reflecting on Michelle's aspirations. She always believed in the power of education to change lives. Outside of school, Michelle enjoyed a rich social life. She had a close-knit group of friends who described her as someone who could light up a room with her laughter and positivity. She was the friend who remembered everyone's birthdays, showed up when it mattered most, and was always willing to lend a hand or a listening ear. Michelle was like a sister to us, one friend said. She made you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she was with you. Michelle's family life was equally vibrant. She was particularly close to her mother, who she often described as her role model. The two shared a bond built on mutual admiration and trust. Her father, while more reserved, supported her quietly, always ensuring she had the tools and encouragement to pursue her goals. Michelle also had a large extended family, and she often visited her aunt's home, where she enjoyed spending time with her younger cousins. To them, she was the fun, caring older sister who always brought warmth and laughter into their lives. It was during one of these visits that Michelle's life intersected with Derek Barrett, her aunt's husband. Derek was a man who to most seemed ordinary, a quiet, unassuming individual who worked a steady job and provided for his family. But beneath the surface lay a darkness that no one, including Michelle, could have anticipated. Michelle's relationship with Derek was cordial, but distant. She respected him as her aunt's husband, but saw little of him during her visits, as he often kept to himself. Still, Derek had noticed Michelle. Over time, he developed an unhealthy obsession with her, a fixation that he carefully hid from those around him. His behavior began to shift subtly. He lingered longer in conversations, found excuses to be near Michelle during family gatherings, and became more withdrawn in his interactions with others. Michelle, busy with her studies and personal life, remained blissfully unaware of Derek's growing obsession. She had no reason to suspect that the man she saw as nothing more than an uncle by marriage harbored dangerous intentions. Her focus was on her future, on the opportunities ahead and the dreams she was working hard to achieve. As Michelle prepared to graduate from high school, her excitement about the future was infectious. She talked about attending university, exploring her career options, and traveling the world. Her family and friends shared in her enthusiasm, supporting her every step of the way. For Michelle, the world was a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of her ambition and optimism. But amidst the joy and anticipation of what lay ahead, a shadow loomed in the form of Derek Barrett. His obsession with Michelle deepened, fueled by fantasies and a growing detachment from reality. To those around him, Derek's behavior seemed increasingly erratic, though no one could have predicted the horrifying events that were about to unfold. On the surface, Michelle's life appeared idyllic. A young woman on the cusp of adulthood, surrounded by love and support. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, danger was quietly taking shape. Derek's fixation was a ticking time bomb, one that would forever shatter the lives of Michelle and those who loved her. Michelle's story is a tragic reminder of how quickly life can change, how trust can be weaponized, and how the most ordinary seeming individuals can harbor unspeakable darkness. As her family and friends later reflected on her life, they spoke not only of the joy she brought to those around her, but also of the lessons her loss taught them about vigilance, love, and resilience. In the weeks leading up to her death, Michelle remained blissfully unaware of the danger that lurked in her uncle's mind. Her days were filled with the laughter of her friends, the love of her family, and the dreams she was eager to pursue. She could not have imagined that her kindness and warmth would one day be met with such betrayal. And as the truth about Derek's actions would later come to light, the world would learn just how devastating that betrayal would be. On a quiet autumn evening in 2015, Michelle Lang arrived at her aunt's home to babysit her younger cousins. It was a task she often took on with joy. Spending time with her cousins was something she genuinely loved. Her aunt, trusting Michelle implicitly, left for work feeling confident that her children were in the best of hands. Michelle was known for her warmth, responsibility, and caring nature, which made her a favorite among the younger members of her family. Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle by marriage, was also at home that evening. To Michelle, this was unremarkable. Derek's quiet and reserved demeanor had never given her a reason to feel uncomfortable, despite his occasional peculiar behavior. As far as she knew, Derek was simply a distant relative who kept to himself. But for Derek, this evening was different. His obsession with Michelle, carefully hidden for years, had reached a breaking point. For weeks, he had been plotting his next move, fueled by a twisted fixation that had taken over his thoughts. To him, Michelle was no longer a niece by marriage. She was an object of his dark desires, a target for his monstrous intentions. That night, after Michelle had put her cousins to bed, Derek confronted her. What began as a seemingly ordinary interaction quickly escalated into something far more sinister. Derek's demeanor shifted, and Michelle, sensing something was wrong, tried to defuse the situation, but Derek's intentions were clear. He wanted to act on the obsession that had consumed him. In a brutal and premeditated act of violence, Derek attacked Michelle. She fought valiantly, her survival instincts kicking in as she tried to escape his grip. Neighbors later reported hearing faint sounds of a struggle, but dismissed them as household noise. Inside the home, Michelle's life was slipping away as she faced the unthinkable, a betrayal by someone she had no reason to distrust. Derek, driven by his depravity, strangled Michelle to death. The brutality of the act was shocking, and the aftermath was even more chilling. To cover his crime, Derek placed Michelle's lifeless body in the trunk of his car. He drove to a secluded location, a short distance from the family home, where he left her body in a ditch. Derek then returned to the house, attempting to resume a facade of normalcy. The following morning, Michelle's aunt returned home and was immediately alarmed by her niece's absence. Michelle's belongings were still in the house, but there was no sign of her. Her phone went unanswered, and calls to friends and family yielded no information about her whereabouts. Panicked, her aunt contacted the police to report Michelle missing. The search for Michelle began swiftly, with police canvassing the area and interviewing neighbors. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover inconsistencies in Derek's account of the previous night. He claimed to have been asleep during Michelle's visit and feigned ignorance about her disappearance. But his demeanor raised suspicions. His answers were evasive and his behavior erratic. 2 days later, a local jogger stumbled upon Michelle's body in the ditch where Derek had left her. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Michelle's family, already consumed with worry, was devastated by the confirmation of her death. For those who knew her, the tragedy was incomprehensible. How could someone so full of life and kindness meet such a horrific end? As investigators pieced together the events leading to Michelle's murder, Derek's involvement became increasingly clear. Forensic evidence from the family home revealed traces of Michelle's blood, and fibers from the trunk of Derek's car matched those on Michelle's clothing. Surveillance footage from nearby streets placed Derek's vehicle near the location where Michelle's body was found, directly contradicting his initial statements. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's demeanor shifted. He grew defensive and hostile, claiming that Michelle's death was an accident, but his story failed to align with the physical evidence, and his increasingly erratic behavior only deepened investigators' suspicions. The most damning piece of evidence came from a USB drive recovered during a search of Derek's belongings. On it were files that revealed Derek's long-standing obsession with Michelle, photos he had secretly taken of her, journal entries detailing his fantasies, and internet searches about methods of strangulation. The discovery painted a chilling picture of premeditation and depravity, leaving no doubt about Derek's intentions. For Michelle's family, the revelation that her uncle by marriage was responsible for her death was a double blow. They were already grappling with the loss of a beloved daughter, niece, and cousin. And now they had to contend with the betrayal of someone they had welcomed into their lives. Michelle's mother, in particular, struggled to comprehend how someone she had trusted could commit such an unthinkable act. In the days following Michelle's murder, her family spoke publicly about her life and the joy she brought to those around her. Her father described her as the light of our family, a young woman whose kindness and warmth had touched everyone she met. She was taken from us by a monster, he said in a tearful statement. But we will not let her memory be overshadowed by his actions. News of Michelle's murder spread quickly, sparking outrage and disbelief throughout the community. Vigils were held in her honor, with hundreds gathering to light candles, share memories, and demand justice. Her story resonated far beyond her immediate circle, as people from all walks of life grappled with the senselessness of her death. Advocacy groups used Michelle's story to highlight the dangers of unchecked obsessions and the need for greater awareness around domestic violence and familial abuse. Her name became a rallying cry for change, a symbol of the importance of vigilance and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. As the investigation continued, the full extent of Derek's depravity came to light. His actions revealed a man who had hidden his true nature for years, using the trust and familiarity of family connections as a shield for his darker impulses. The evidence against him was overwhelming, setting the stage for a trial that would bring his monstrous behavior to public light. For Michelle, her kindness and trust had been met with the ultimate betrayal. But even in the face of such tragedy, her family and community vowed to honor her memory, ensuring that her story would not be forgotten. The truth about Derek Barrett would soon be revealed in court, where justice for Michelle would become the focus of an entire nation. The discovery of Michelle Lang's body in a secluded ditch marked the start of an intense and thorough investigation. From the outset, the police were determined to uncover the truth behind her tragic death. What they found painted a chilling portrait of premeditation and betrayal. With Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle by marriage, at the center of it all. The forensic evidence recovered from the family home and Derek's car provided a solid foundation for the investigation. Blood traces matching Michelle's DNA were found on the carpet in the living room, contradicting Derek's claims that he had no interaction with her that night. The fibers recovered from the trunk of Derek's car matched those from Michelle's clothing, placing her in the vehicle after her death. Surveillance footage proved equally damning. Cameras in the area captured Derek's car leaving the family home late at night, heading toward the location where Michelle's body was later discovered. Investigators used timestamps to establish a timeline that directly implicated Derek in the transportation and disposal of her body. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's initial composure began to falter. His statements to police were riddled with inconsistencies, and his attempts to explain away the evidence only deepened their suspicions. Detectives described Derek's demeanor as defensive and agitated, a stark contrast to the calm and collected persona he had initially presented. The breakthrough moment in the investigation came when detectives searched Derek's belongings and found a USB drive hidden in his desk. What they uncovered on the drive shocked even seasoned investigators. It contained hundreds of photos of Michelle, many taken without her knowledge. These ranged from family gatherings to private moments in the house, suggesting a disturbing level of surveillance and fixation. More troubling were Derek's journal entries, saved as digital files on the drive. They detailed his growing obsession with Michelle, describing her in objectifying and possessive terms. Some entries included fantasies about harming her, which closely mirrored the circumstances of her death. Investigators also found internet searches related to strangulation, disposing of bodies, and avoiding detection by law enforcement. The USB drive was a treasure trove of evidence that not only confirmed Derek's guilt, but also revealed the premeditated nature of his actions. Armed with overwhelming evidence, police arrested Derek Barrett on charges of first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. The news of his arrest sent shockwaves through the community and left Michelle's family grappling with a mix of relief and devastation. On one hand, they were relieved that the person responsible for Michelle's death had been apprehended. On the other, the revelation that it was a family member compounded their grief and betrayal. Derek maintained his innocence, insisting that Michelle's death was an accident. He claimed she had fallen and hit her head during an argument, and in a panic, he had disposed of her body. However, this narrative failed to align with the forensic evidence and the contents of the USB drive. Prosecutors were confident they had a watertight case against him. Derek's trial began in mid-2016, drawing significant media attention. The courtroom was filled with Michelle's family and friends, members of the public, and reporters eager to document the proceedings. For Michelle's loved ones, the trial was a painful but necessary step toward justice. The prosecution presented a methodical case, starting with forensic experts who testified about the evidence recovered from the crime scene and Derek's car. They detailed how the blood patterns, fibers, and surveillance footage contradicted Derek's claims and pointed to foul play. The USB drive, however, was the centerpiece of the prosecution's argument. Its contents provided a chilling glimpse into Derek's mindset and left no doubt about his premeditated intent. Michelle's mother took the stand, delivering an emotional testimony about her daughter's character, dreams, and the impact of her loss. Her words moved many in the courtroom to tears and underscored the gravity of Derek's betrayal. She trusted him, Michelle's mother said. We all did. And he used that trust to destroy her. Derek's defense team attempted to argue that his actions were the result of panic rather than malice. They claimed that his obsession with Michelle, while troubling, did not prove intent to kill. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and the jury struggled to reconcile his defense with the calculated nature of his actions. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 2 days before reaching a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Derek showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but the sense of relief in the courtroom was palpable. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, condemning his actions as a profound betrayal of trust and humanity. For Michelle's family, the verdict provided some measure of closure. While it could never undo the pain of losing her, knowing that Derek would face justice brought a sense of accountability. Outside the courthouse, Michelle's mother expressed gratitude to the investigators and prosecutors who had worked tirelessly on the case. "This doesn't bring Michelle back," she said, "but it ensures that he can never hurt anyone else." The trial and its outcome sparked widespread discussions about the dangers of unchecked obsession and the betrayal of trust within families. Advocacy groups used Michelle's story to raise awareness about the warning signs of predatory behavior and the importance of vigilance in protecting vulnerable individuals. Michelle's community honored her memory with a candlelight vigil where hundreds gathered to celebrate her life and commit to preventing similar tragedies. Her story became a rallying cry for change, inspiring efforts to improve education around abuse and strengthen protections for those at risk. Though the trial marked the end of Derek Barrett's freedom, Michelle's family and friends knew their work was not done. They vowed to honor her legacy by sharing her story and advocating for greater awareness of the dangers lurking within seemingly safe environments. Michelle's life, though tragically cut short, became a symbol of resilience, love, and the enduring fight for justice. The conclusion of Derek Barrett's trial brought justice for Michelle Lang and her grieving family, but the journey toward healing had only just begun. The weight of her loss, compounded by the betrayal of someone they trusted, left Michelle's family and friends grappling with deep emotional scars. Yet, amidst their pain, they found strength in honoring Michelle's memory and ensuring her story would inspire change. Michelle's parents, devastated by the loss of their only daughter, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives without her. For Michelle's mother, the bond they shared was irreplaceable. "She wasn't just my daughter," she said tearfully in an interview. "She was my best friend, my light, and my inspiration." Her father, a man of few words, expressed his grief through quiet resilience. He became a pillar of strength for the family, supporting his wife and ensuring Michelle's memory lived on in their daily lives. Together, they established a small memorial in their home, filled with photos, letters, and mementos that captured Michelle's vibrant spirit. The outpouring of support from the community was overwhelming. Michelle's story had touched countless lives, and people from all walks of life came together to offer their condolences and help the family heal. Vigils, fundraisers, and memorials were organized to celebrate Michelle's life and raise awareness about the dangers of unchecked obsession and abuse. At a candlelight vigil held shortly after the trial, hundreds gathered to honor Michelle's memory. Her friends spoke of her kindness, ambition, and unwavering positivity. Her former classmates and teachers shared stories of her dedication and passion for helping others. The vigil became a poignant reminder of the impact Michelle had on those around her and the profound loss her death represented. Determined to ensure that Michelle's story would not be forgotten, her family channeled their grief into advocacy. They partnered with local organizations to raise awareness about domestic violence, familial abuse, and the warning signs of predatory behavior. Michelle's mother became a vocal advocate, speaking at schools, community centers, and public events about the importance of vigilance and education. Michelle's trust was used against her, her mother said during one event. But if her story can save even one person from the same fate, then her light will continue to shine. The family also worked to support reforms in the justice system, particularly in how cases of obsession and abuse within families are handled. They called for stricter penalties for offenders, better resources for victims, and mandatory education programs to help individuals recognize and address dangerous behaviors. Their efforts sparked important conversations and inspired meaningful changes in their community. To honor Michelle's life and dreams, her family established the Michelle Lang Foundation, dedicated to supporting at-risk youth and advocating for safer communities. The foundation provided scholarships for students pursuing careers in education, Michelle's own dream, and funded programs aimed at raising awareness about abuse and fostering positive relationships. Through the foundation, Michelle's family sought to turn their tragedy into a force for good. Michelle wanted to make a difference in the world, her father said at the foundation's launch, and through this work, her legacy will live on. The foundation's impact was immediate and profound. Within its first year, it had awarded scholarships to dozens of students and partnered with organizations to deliver workshops on abuse prevention and relationship safety. Michelle's story became a cornerstone of these programs, reminding participants of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and resilience. For those who knew Michelle, her life and death became a symbol of resilience and the enduring fight for justice. Her ability to inspire others, even in the face of tragedy, resonated deeply with her community and beyond. Survivors of abuse and families affected by similar crimes reached out to Michelle's family, sharing their own stories and drawing strength from her legacy. Social media campaigns, using hashtags like Justice for Michelle and Her Light Lives On, amplified her story and brought global attention to issues of abuse and betrayal within families. Michelle's legacy became a rallying cry for change, uniting people in their efforts to build safer and more compassionate communities. Though the pain of losing Michelle would never fully fade, her family found solace in the impact she continued to have. They focused on the positive change her story inspired, the lives saved by their advocacy, and the countless people who found hope and strength in her memory. Michelle's story didn't end with her death, her mother said. It's a story of love, resilience, and the power of turning tragedy into action. As the years passed, Michelle's name became synonymous with hope and change. Her legacy endured not just through the foundation and advocacy work, but also in the hearts of those who loved her. In the face of unimaginable loss, Michelle's family and community chose to honor her life by ensuring her light would never be extinguished. Michelle Lang's story serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring power of love and justice. Her life, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire and guide others, proving that even in the darkest moments, light can prevail. Michelle Lang's tragic death left a lasting impact on her family, friends, and community. But its echoes reach far beyond those who knew her personally. Her story exposed broader societal issues, such as the dangers of unchecked obsession, the vulnerability of individuals within families, and the failures of systems meant to protect them. As her legacy grew, it inspired conversations and initiatives aimed at creating a safer, more vigilant society. One of the most unsettling aspects of Michelle's story was the revelation that the perpetrator, Derek Barrett, was a trusted family member. The betrayal of someone so close to her underscored the complexity of familial abuse, where danger often hides in plain sight. Advocacy groups used Michelle's case to raise awareness about this often overlooked form of violence, emphasizing that abuse and obsession can exist even within seemingly stable and loving families. Experts highlighted the warning signs of obsessive and predatory behavior, patterns that may seem benign on the surface but indicate deeper issues. For Derek, his fixation on Michelle had grown over years, yet no one recognized the severity of his intentions. This failure to identify and address red flags became a focal point in discussions about improving vigilance and education within communities. Michelle's case also revealed gaps in the systems designed to prevent and address domestic and familial violence. Advocacy organizations called for reforms in several areas, including education and awareness. Introducing mandatory training for educators, social workers, and healthcare professionals to recognize signs of obsession, manipulation, and abuse. Support systems for victims. Ensuring victims of familial abuse have access to confidential resources and safe reporting mechanisms, even when the abuser is a family member. tougher penalties, advocating for harsher sentences for perpetrators of familial violence to serve as both punishment and deterrence. Lawmakers, moved by the public outcry and Michelle's family's advocacy, introduced several policy proposals to address these gaps. These included funding for abuse prevention programs, expanding access to mental health resources, and strengthening legal protections for at-risk individuals. While progress was slow, Michelle's case became a symbol of the urgent need for change. The case also prompted discussions about the role of mental health in understanding and preventing predatory behavior. Derek's actions revealed a deeply disturbed individual whose obsession had gone unchecked for years. Advocates argued that better access to mental health services, particularly for individuals exhibiting troubling behaviors, could help prevent such tragedies. Workshops and campaigns focused on educating communities about the importance of early intervention, emphasizing that seeking help for someone showing obsessive or predatory tendencies is not only compassionate but necessary. Michelle's story served as a powerful example of how ignoring these signs can have devastating consequences. Michelle's story resonated far beyond her hometown, thanks in part to the tireless efforts of her family and the reach of social media. Campaigns like Star Justice for Michelle and Ashraf's Her Light Lives On mobilized people around the world to share her story and advocate for change. Survivors of abuse and families affected by similar tragedies found solidarity in her legacy, using her story as a platform to demand greater protections and accountability. The international attention spurred collaborations between advocacy groups and governments to address the root causes of abuse and violence. Michelle's name became synonymous with resilience and the fight for justice, inspiring countless initiatives to create safer environments for women and vulnerable individuals. Through the Michelle Lang Foundation, her family continued to honor her life by supporting at-risk youth, funding education programs, and raising awareness about familial abuse. The foundation's work expanded rapidly, partnering with schools, community organizations, and governments to deliver impactful programs. Each scholarship awarded and workshop held was a testament to Michelle's enduring impact. Michelle's mother, now a prominent advocate, often reflected on the lessons her daughter's story taught the world. Michelle's death was a tragedy, she said in a public address, but her life was a gift, a reminder that love, compassion, and vigilance can change lives. It's up to us to ensure her story isn't just one of loss, but of hope and transformation. Michelle Lang's story is a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession and the need for vigilance, education, and systemic reform. It challenges society to confront uncomfortable truths about familial violence and to prioritize the safety and well-being of individuals in all environments. Her legacy is a call to action, a demand for justice, accountability, and change. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can emerge, illuminating a path toward a safer, more compassionate world. Michelle's life, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire and guide efforts to ensure that no one else suffers the way she did. As her mother often said, Michelle believed in making the world a better place. It's up to us to carry that belief forward. Michelle Lang's light lives on, not only in the hearts of those who knew her, but in the countless lives touched by her story and the movement for change it inspired. It began with whispers. The town of Ni, nestled in China's serene countryside, had always been a place where life unfolded predictably. Families tended their fields, neighbors greeted each other warmly, and the days passed in the kind of peace that made danger seem like a distant concept. But beneath this tranquil facade, a darkness was stirring, one that would shake the town to its core. In the summer of 1993, the first of many went missing. A young woman, vibrant and full of life, disappeared on her way home from work. Her family, frantic with worry, scoured the streets and fields, calling her name. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of her. The police, stretched thin and accustomed to petty crimes rather than life and death cases, chalked it up to a runaway or an unfortunate accident. But her family knew better. She wasn't the type to leave without a word. Then it happened again. Another disappearance. And another. Young women, all seemingly unrelated, vanished without a trace. Rumors began to swirl. Stories of a man seen loitering near alleyways, of shadowy figures moving through the night. The townsfolk, gripped by fear, started locking their doors earlier, glancing over their shoulders as they walked the quiet streets. But the truth was far worse than any rumor. At the heart of this growing nightmare was Shu Lixia, a man whose name, even years later, would send chills down spines. A local farmer turned predator, Shu blended seamlessly into the community, a face so unassuming that no one would suspect the horrors he concealed. Working alongside him was Shu Lixia, his accomplice and pawn, a woman whose story blurred the line between victim and perpetrator. The pair operated with chilling precision. Zhu, the mastermind, preyed on the vulnerabilities of his victims, offering rides to stranded women or promising safety in a moment of perceived danger. Shu, manipulated and coerced, helped lure their victims into a trap from which there was no escape. Together, they orchestrated one of the most horrifying killing sprees in modern Chinese history, leaving 42 people dead in their wake. But the terror they unleashed wasn't just in the act. It was in the aftermath, the way the victims' families were left to wonder, hope, and grieve. The way the town itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next tragedy to strike. The way the police, ill-equipped for a case of this magnitude, stumbled in their efforts to bring the killers to justice. And then there was Shu. Her story, as it unfolded, was as complex as it was heartbreaking. She was the accomplice who had helped Shu claim his victims, but she was also a victim herself, forced into complicity by years of manipulation and fear. When she finally turned against Shu, leading authorities to the shallow graves that dotted the countryside, her testimony became the key to unraveling the case. Yet, even in her cooperation, questions lingered. Was she merely a pawn, or had she crossed a line that could never be forgiven? The story of Shu and Shu is not just one of violence and fear. It is a tale of a community forever scarred, of justice pursued in the face of unimaginable horror, and of the thin, fragile line that separates good from evil. As we journey into this dark chapter of Ni's history, we will uncover the events that led to the capture of China's most violent serial killer, the devastation left in his wake, and the ripple effects that continue to be felt today. This is the story of Shu Lixia and Shu Lixia, a tale of betrayal, survival, and the relentless pursuit of justice. But it is also the story of the lives lost, the families torn apart, and a town that would never be the same. It all began in the quiet town of Ni with whispers. But whispers, as we'll come to see, have a way of turning into screams. Shu Lixia was not the kind of man who drew attention. A farmer by trade, he had a weathered face, quiet demeanor, and the sort of presence that seemed to blend into the background. But beneath this unassuming exterior lay a man who would go on to commit some of the most heinous crimes in Chinese history. His transformation from a seemingly ordinary laborer to a calculating serial killer was as chilling as the acts he carried out. Born into poverty in the 1950s, Shu grew up in a small village outside of Ni. His early years were marked by hardship, and he quickly developed a reputation for his short temper and manipulative nature. As a young man, Shu drifted from job to job, never finding stability or purpose. But while his peers sought to escape the cycle of poverty through hard work and perseverance, Shu grew resentful of the world around him. He blamed others for his struggles and began to view people not as individuals but as tools for his gain. By the 1980s, Shu had relocated to Ni, where he worked sporadically as a farmer and odd-job laborer. He married Shu Lixia, a woman whose life would become inextricably linked to his crimes. Shu was 15 years younger than Shu and came from an equally impoverished background. Naive and desperate for security, she fell into Shu's orbit, unaware of the darkness she was aligning herself with. For a time, Shu and Shu lived quietly on the outskirts of Ni. But Shu's bitterness and frustration continued to fester, and he began seeking ways to assert control over the world around him. He started with petty theft, then graduated to more calculated schemes, luring victims into traps under the guise of offering help or protection. His early crimes went largely unnoticed, small enough to avoid scrutiny, but significant enough to embolden him. Shu Lixia's involvement in the crimes remains one of the most complex and debated aspects of the case. Initially, Shu was a victim of Shu's manipulative and abusive behavior. He isolated her from friends and family, controlling every aspect of her life and instilling in her a deep sense of fear and dependence. Over time, this control evolved into something more sinister as Shu began to involve Shu in his schemes. Shu preyed on Shu's vulnerabilities, coercing her into assisting him with his growing criminal activities. Her role started small, distracting passers-by while Shu stole their belongings, for example. But it wasn't long before she became an active participant in his darker plans. Shu used a combination of threats, manipulation, and psychological abuse to ensure her compliance. For Shu, defying Shu wasn't an option. The consequences were too terrifying to contemplate. By the early 1990s, Shu had become a reluctant accomplice in Shu's escalating violence. She helped him identify potential victims, often women traveling alone, whom Shu would approach under the pretense of offering a ride or assistance. Once the victims were in their grasp, Shu's role became even more disturbing. She was forced to help restrain them, a tactic Shu employed to ensure they couldn't escape before he carried out his brutal acts. Shu's involvement blurred the line between victim and perpetrator, leaving a trail of moral and ethical questions in its wake. Shu's methods were chillingly systematic. He targeted women who appeared vulnerable, young professionals walking home late, migrant workers unfamiliar with the area, or women whose circumstances left them isolated. Under the guise of a kind stranger, Shu offered them rides, food, or shelter. Once they trusted him enough to follow, his demeanor would change. Many of the victims were taken to Shu's farmhouse, where he had prepared a grim fate for them. There, Shu would restrain the women before Shu committed his unspeakable acts. He showed no remorse, viewing his victims as objects to be used and discarded. Shu, trapped in the web of Shu's control, had no choice but to comply. Though her internal conflict grew with each crime. As the months turned into years, Shu's reign of terror claimed the lives of 42 individuals. Their disappearances were a growing source of fear in Ni. But Shu's ability to appear unremarkable allowed him to operate in the shadows. The police, overwhelmed by the sheer number of missing persons cases, struggled to connect the dots. By the mid-1990s, Ni was a town transformed. The once bustling streets grew quiet after sunset, and families warned their daughters not to travel alone. The disappearances had become an open secret, and while no one knew the identity of the predator, his presence was felt everywhere. Shu reveled in the fear he created, taking perverse satisfaction in the control he exerted not only over his victims, but over the entire town. His confidence grew, and with it, his willingness to take risks. It was this arrogance that would eventually lead to his downfall. Shu Lixia's life had become a waking nightmare. Years of abuse, manipulation, and coerced complicity had left her hollow. But deep inside, a spark of humanity remained. It was this spark that finally drove her to turn against Shu. One fateful night, after another victim met their tragic end, Shu made a decision that would change everything. While Shu slept, she slipped out of the farmhouse and made her way to the local police station. Her testimony, delivered in fits of sobs and trembling words, was the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for. Shu's account provided a roadmap to Shu's crimes, including the locations of burial sites and the methods he had used to evade capture. Her confession was not without consequences. Shu knew that by implicating Shu, she was also implicating herself. But for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that justice might finally prevail for the victims and their families. With Shu's testimony as their guide, police launched a massive operation to uncover the truth about Shu Lixia. What they found was more horrifying than they could have imagined. Shallow graves scattered across the countryside, each one holding the remains of a life stolen far too soon. As the scale of Shu's crimes came to light, the town of Ni braced itself for the shocking revelations that would follow. For years, Shu had operated undetected, using his unremarkable appearance and cunning manipulation to mask the monster within. But now, with Shu's help, his reign of terror was finally coming to an end. The stage was set for one of the most high-profile criminal cases in China's history. Shu Lixia, the predator who had turned Ni into a town of whispers and shadows, would soon face the full weight of justice. When Shu Lixia arrived at the Ni police station in the early hours of the morning, she was shaking uncontrollably. Her gaunt face and hollow eyes reflected years of torment, but her voice carried the weight of resolve. "It's him," she whispered. "Shu Lixia. I can't let him do it anymore." Shu's confession was the break the police had been waiting for, but the details she provided revealed a nightmare beyond their worst imaginings. For years, Shu had preyed on the town's most vulnerable, leaving a trail of destruction and despair. With Shu's testimony as their guide, the police launched an investigation that would unravel the horrifying truth. Detectives had been struggling to connect the dozens of missing persons cases in Ni. The victims came from diverse backgrounds: young professionals, migrant workers, and even a few tourists passing through the area. The only common threads were the sudden disappearances and the lack of witnesses or leads. While locals had whispered about a possible serial killer, the police had little concrete evidence to work with. Shu's confession changed everything. She provided detailed accounts of Shu's methods, from the way he lured his victims to the locations where he buried their bodies. She described the farmhouse where the crimes had taken place and pointed investigators to areas in the countryside where Shu had hidden his victims. For the first time, the police had a roadmap to Shu's atrocities. A team of officers was dispatched to the farmhouse immediately. What they found confirmed Shu's horrifying account. The property, unremarkable on the surface, held evidence of unspeakable acts. In the basement, investigators discovered restraints, tools, and traces of blood that matched the profiles of several missing women. Outside, in the fields surrounding the house, forensic teams uncovered shallow graves, each holding the remains of Shu's victims. The discovery of the burial sites was a turning point in the investigation. Forensic experts meticulously exhumed the bodies, cataloging every detail in hopes of identifying the victims and building a case against Shu. DNA analysis, still a relatively new technology in the 1990s, played a crucial role in connecting the remains to missing persons reports. Items found with the bodies, jewelry, clothing, and personal effects helped confirm their identities. The evidence collected from the graves painted a grim picture of Shu's methods. Many of the victims bore signs of prolonged abuse and violence, underscoring the brutality of his crimes. The meticulous nature of Shu's burial process suggested a man who took pride in his ability to hide in plain sight, confident that his actions would never be discovered. With the evidence mounting, the police prepared to apprehend Zhu Lixia. They knew they needed to act quickly and decisively. Zhu's history of manipulation and evasion made him a flight risk. Under the cover of darkness, a team of officers surrounded the farmhouse. Armed with arrest warrants and a growing sense of urgency, they moved in. Shu was taken into custody without a struggle. When the police entered the farmhouse, they found him sitting at the kitchen table, eating a bowl of rice as though nothing was amiss. His calm demeanor was unnerving, but it crumbled as officers began reading out the charges against him. Shu's protests of innocence rang hollow against the overwhelming evidence that had been uncovered. In custody, Shu initially denied all allegations. He claimed that Shu was lying out of spite and that the evidence found at his farmhouse had been planted. But his calm facade quickly gave way under the pressure of questioning. Detectives presented him with photographs of the burial sites, forensic reports, and Shu's testimony, forcing him to confront the weight of his actions. Shu's responses were erratic, at times defiant, at other times almost remorseful. He admitted to knowing some of the victims, but insisted their deaths were accidental or the result of misunderstandings. However, his attempts to downplay his involvement only deepened investigators' resolve. The evidence against him was too strong to ignore. While Shu's interrogation unfolded, Shu remained in protective custody, providing additional details about the crimes. Her testimony was harrowing, filled with moments of hesitation and visible distress. She described the years of abuse she had endured at Shu's hands, from his psychological manipulation to the threats that kept her compliant. Shu recounted how Shu had coerced her into assisting him, forcing her to lure victims and help conceal their bodies. She admitted to her role in the crimes, but insisted that she had acted out of fear for her own life. He controlled everything, she told investigators. I was trapped. If I didn't help him, I would have been next. Shu's testimony was both a confession and a plea for understanding. Her cooperation provided crucial insights into Shu's methods and motives. But it also raised difficult questions about her culpability. Was she a victim, a perpetrator, or both? The answer would be left to the courts to decide. As the investigation progressed, the full scope of Shu's reign of terror became clear. Over a span of 5 years, he had abducted, assaulted, and murdered 42 individuals. Each victim represented a life cut short, a family left to mourn, and a community forever scarred. The sheer number of victims shocked even the most experienced investigators. Shu had operated with chilling efficiency, exploiting his unassuming appearance and the trust of his victims. He had preyed on the vulnerable, using deception and force to achieve his twisted goals. The fact that he had gone undetected for so long only added to the sense of outrage and grief. News of Shu's arrest spread quickly through Ni, bringing a mix of relief and devastation. Families of the missing finally had answers, but the confirmation of their worst fears was almost too much to bear. Vigils were held across the town, with residents gathering to honor the victims and support their grieving families. For the people of Ni, the revelation of Shu's crimes shattered the sense of safety and trust that had once defined their community. The town, once known for its tranquility, became a symbol of both resilience and vulnerability, a reminder that even the quietest places can harbor unspeakable horrors. As Shu awaited trial, the case drew national attention. Media outlets chronicled every development, from the discovery of the graves to the emotional testimonies of the victims' families. The public was captivated by the sheer scale of the crimes and the complexity of the investigation. For many, the case raised broader questions about justice, accountability, and the need for systemic changes to prevent similar tragedies. Shu's capture was a victory for law enforcement, but it also highlighted the gaps and challenges in addressing crimes of this magnitude. The stage was set for one of the most high-profile trials in Chinese history. As the nation prepared to confront the horrors of Shu's actions, the people of Ni clung to the hope that justice would bring some measure of closure to a community forever changed. Shu Lixia's trial, one of the most anticipated in Chinese history, began in the spring of 1996. By this time, the public had come to know the horrifying details of his crimes. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, journalists, and members of the Ni community, all eager for answers and justice. Shu, the man responsible for 42 murders, entered the courtroom with the same unsettling calm that had marked his arrest. Beside him sat Shu Lixia, his wife and accomplice, her demeanor a stark contrast. She appeared gaunt and hollow, burdened by guilt and the weight of her testimony. For many, this trial wasn't just about convicting Zhu. It was also about understanding the complex dynamics between predator and pawn. The prosecution built a damning case against Zhu, meticulously piecing together evidence collected during the investigation. Their opening statements set the tone. Zhu was a predator who had exploited trust and vulnerability to carry out a reign of terror that left 42 people dead and an entire community in fear. Forensic experts testified about the evidence recovered from Zhu's farmhouse, including traces of blood, personal belongings of the victims, and the tools used to restrain them. Photographs of the shallow graves displayed in court left the audience visibly shaken. The prosecution emphasized the calculated nature of Zhu's actions, painting him as a cold and remorseless killer. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence was the testimony of Shu Lixia. Although she was also on trial, her cooperation with investigators made her an invaluable witness. Shu described in painful detail the years of abuse she endured and the extent to which Shu manipulated her. She recounted how he coerced her into luring victims and assisting with their captivity, all under the threat of violence. "I was terrified of him," Shu said, her voice trembling. "He controlled every part of my life. I didn't want to do it, but I didn't see a way out." Zhu's defense team faced an uphill battle. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his own demeanor, alternating between defiance and indifference, did little to garner sympathy. The defense attempted to portray Zhu as a man whose actions were driven by desperation and a troubled past. They argued that his crimes were not premeditated but the result of mental instability. This argument fell flat in the face of the prosecution's evidence. The systematic nature of Zhu's crimes, his methods of targeting victims, the preparation of the farmhouse, and the careful disposal of bodies left no room for doubt about his intent. The jury, like the public, struggled to reconcile the man sitting before them with the horrific acts he had committed. Zhu's defense was more nuanced. Her legal team argued that she was as much a victim as the women Zhu targeted. They presented evidence of the abuse she suffered at Zhu's hands, including medical records and witness testimonies from neighbors who had observed bruises and other signs of violence. They contended that Zhu's involvement in the crimes was the result of coercion, not free will. The trial's most heart-wrenching moments came from the families of Zhu's victims. Parents, siblings, and friends took the stand to share their stories, painting vivid pictures of the lives that were cut short. They spoke of daughters who were aspiring teachers, sisters who dreamed of becoming artists, and friends who brought joy to everyone around them. One mother held up a photograph of her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "She was my everything," she said. "He took her from me, and I will never forgive him for that." These testimonies served as a poignant reminder of the human toll of Zhu's actions. They also galvanized the public's demand for justice, ensuring that the focus remained on the victims and their families. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 3 days before reaching their verdict. Zhu Lixia was found guilty of 42 counts of murder, kidnapping, and related charges. The judge, in his sentencing, condemned Shu's actions as an affront to humanity and imposed the harshest penalty allowed by law: death by execution. For Shu Lixia, the outcome was more complex. While the court acknowledged her cooperation and the abuse she had suffered, they also held her accountable for her role in the crimes. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. The decision sparked heated debate, with some arguing that Shu deserved a harsher sentence, while others viewed her as a victim in her own right. News of the verdict spread quickly, eliciting a mix of relief and unresolved grief for the families of the victims. Shu's conviction provided a sense of closure but could never undo the pain of their loss. Many expressed gratitude for the efforts of the police and prosecutors, whose diligence had ensured justice was served. The trial also reignited discussions about the complexities of coercion and complicity. Shu's sentence, in particular, became a focal point for public debate, prompting questions about how society should balance accountability with compassion in cases of abuse. The conclusion of the trial marked the end of a dark chapter for Ni, but the scars left by Shu's crimes would linger for years to come. The town, once defined by its tranquility, became a symbol of resilience in the face of unimaginable horror. Memorials were erected in honor of the victims, serving as both a tribute to their lives and a reminder of the importance of vigilance. For the people of Ni, healing was a slow and painful process. Families of the victims found solace in their shared grief, forming support groups to help each other navigate the aftermath. The town also took steps to rebuild its sense of safety, implementing community watch programs and advocating for greater resources to prevent violence. Shu Lixia's trial and conviction resonated far beyond Ni, prompting nationwide discussions about crime prevention, justice, and the need to address systemic failures. Advocacy groups use the case to highlight the importance of early intervention in cases of abuse and the need for greater protections for vulnerable individuals. The trial also underscored the complexities of human behavior, particularly in cases involving coercion and manipulation. Shu's story became a catalyst for broader conversations about the interplay between victimhood and complicity, challenging society to grapple with difficult moral and ethical questions. As Shu awaited his execution, the people of Ni began to rebuild, carrying the memory of the victims with them. Their lives, though tragically cut short, became a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring fight for justice. The conclusion of Shu Lixia's trial marked a turning point for the town of Ni and the broader community. While the conviction and sentencing brought a sense of justice, the scars left by his crimes ran deep. The aftermath was defined by efforts to rebuild, honor the victims, and grapple with the lingering questions about how such horrors could have unfolded in their midst. In the months following his trial, Shu Lixia awaited his execution. The knowledge that his life would soon end brought some comfort to the victims' families, who saw his death as a final act of accountability. On a gray morning in early 1997, Shu was executed by firing squad, a swift and definitive end to one of China's most violent serial killers. For many, the execution closed the chapter, but it didn't erase the pain. "His death won't bring my daughter back," one grieving father said. "But at least I know he can't hurt anyone else." Shulixia, meanwhile, began serving her life sentence in a women's prison. Her fate remained a subject of public debate. Some believed she deserved greater punishment, arguing that her involvement in the crimes could not be excused. Others, however, viewed her as a victim, trapped in Shu's web of manipulation and control. Shu herself expressed deep remorse, writing letters to the victims' families, apologizing for her role, and offering to testify in any future proceedings to ensure Shu's crimes would never be forgotten. The town of Ni, once known for its quiet pastoral charm, struggled to regain its footing. The community, forever altered by the crimes, found itself grappling with a collective trauma. Streets that had once bustled with life now felt subdued, and residents spoke in hushed tones about the events that had scarred their home. Efforts to rebuild began almost immediately. Local officials worked to strengthen the town's social fabric, organizing support groups for victims' families and providing counseling services for residents. Memorials were erected at the sites where Shu's victims were found, each marked with plaques bearing their names and stories. These sites became places of mourning and reflection, drawing visitors who sought to pay their respects and learn from the tragedy. Community leaders also prioritized safety and awareness. Neighborhood watch programs were established, and local schools introduced educational initiatives aimed at teaching children about personal safety and recognizing red flags in relationships. These measures, while small, symbolized the town's determination to prevent such horrors from ever occurring again. For the families of Shu's victims, life would never return to normal. Each lost loved one left a void that could never be filled, yet, in their grief, many found purpose. Several families became vocal advocates for change, working to raise awareness about the dangers of unchecked violence and the importance of early intervention. A coalition of victims' families formed the Knee Victims Advocacy Group, which sought to provide support for those affected by violent crime and lobby for stronger protections for vulnerable individuals. Their efforts led to the establishment of a national hotline for victims of abuse and coercion, a resource that has since helped thousands escape dangerous situations. The families also organized annual memorial events to honor their loved ones. These gatherings brought together people from across the country, uniting them in their shared commitment to remembrance and resilience. For the families, these events were a way to ensure that their loved ones' lives were celebrated, not defined solely by their tragic ends. Shulixia's case became a national symbol of the importance of vigilance and the fragility of trust. Media outlets continued to cover the story long after the trial's conclusion, examining the societal factors that had allowed Shu to operate undetected for so long. Experts pointed to gaps in law enforcement, cultural stigmas around abuse, and a lack of mental health resources as contributing factors. The case also prompted discussions about the role of community in preventing violence. Many pointed out that Chu had thrived in part because of his ability to appear unremarkable, an ordinary man hiding in plain sight. This realization led to calls for greater awareness and community involvement in addressing signs of predatory behavior. The legacy of Shu's crimes extended to significant changes in China's approach to crime prevention and victim protection. Among the reforms inspired by the case were improved law enforcement training. Officers across the country received enhanced training in identifying and responding to patterns of violence, particularly in cases involving coercion and manipulation. Increased support for victims. Resources for victims of abuse, including counseling services and safe shelters, were expanded, ensuring that more people had access to help. Stricter sentencing laws. The case led to the introduction of harsher penalties for individuals who used coercion or abuse to involve others in criminal activities. These reforms, while not erasing the pain of the past, provided a sense of progress and hope for a safer future. As the years passed, the story of Shulixia and his crimes became a cautionary tale taught in schools and discussed in communities. Documentaries, books, and articles explored the case, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and the need to confront evil wherever it lurks. Shulixia, despite her imprisonment, became a symbol of the complexity of human behavior. Her story was used to educate law enforcement and psychologists about the dynamics of coercion, helping professionals better understand how to support victims caught in similar circumstances. Above all, the legacy of Shu's crimes is the enduring memory of the victims. Their lives, once overshadowed by the horror of their deaths, are now celebrated through stories, memorials, and the work of their families. Each victim is remembered not for how they were taken, but for who they were, their dreams, their kindness, and the joy they brought to those who knew them. As one family member eloquently said at a memorial event, they were more than victims. They were daughters, sisters, friends, and mothers, and it's up to us to ensure that their light continues to shine. The town of Ni, though forever changed, has found a way to move forward. Its residents carry the weight of the past, but also the lessons it brought. The community, united by tragedy, has become a model of resilience and vigilance, a place where the memory of those lost is honored with every step toward a brighter future. The story of Shulixia and his victims is one of heartbreak and horror, but also one of strength and hope. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can endure, rebuild, and strive for a world where such atrocities are never repeated.